Hello and welcome back to Thinking Like a Geographer, an AP Human Geography test review. This is one of our introductory videos, and this one is about how to write an FRQ. FRQ stands for Free Response Question. They are the format of the test writing questions that you will be looking at as you take the test. Today we're going to walk through the process of answering these questions, how to answer them quickly and efficiently and effectively. Once again, you do have about 25 minutes per question as you are writing, and so having a process that works, having a process that have practiced and are familiar with, is going to help you write more efficiently and more effectively and more quickly. And so that's what we're going to work on throughout the course of the review, starting with this particular video, and we'll look at a practice question, and then we'll start from there with some others. So let's take a look at our first kind of concept, and that is the test format. There are some things you need to know. First of all, there are 3 FRQ questions, or you will have 75 minutes to answer those, 25 minutes each, and they count for 50% of your score. You'll have 75 multiple choice questions to answer in 60 minutes, and you'll have 50% of your score come from that as well. Your test is scored on a 1 to 5 scale, and 4 or 5 is recommended and highly recommended. That's where you want to be in order to be considered for college credit at most places. You need a 4 or a 5. And also, the tests are normed each year, so students are not compared to previous year students. So a 1 or a 5 one year maybe is different than what a 5 in another year is, based on whatever that pool of tests that were taken and submitted look like. All right, so how do we write an FRQ? How do we address one of these? So once again, you'll have 25 minutes to write an FRQ. And within that 25 minutes, what I tell my students and what I'm highly encouraging you guys to do, and what we will model and practice every video, is to spend 5 minutes to plan your question, plan your response, write it out, outline it, plan it, so that you can be sure that you cover everything that's necessary and that you have properly accounted for those things. Okay, of course, the first step is to plan. You will then complete an outline that is done in complete sentences, a complete sentence outline. When you're done with your complete sentence outline, it will look very much like paragraphs or a formal written component. And then you will go back at the end and review all of your information to make sure that it aligns the way that it does. And that should take you about 25 minutes. So at the end of that process, you should be ready to move on to the next question, which is our goal at the end. Move on. Okay. Once again, 25 minutes is what you have. You do not want to spend a whole lot of other time. Okay, let's do one together. All right, geographers often disagree about the role of the physical environment in affecting human activity. Part A, define and give an example of geographic determinism. Part B, define and give an example of geographical possibilism. Part C, distinguish between the effects of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global population. And Part D, distinguish between the effects of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global agriculture. Okay, this is what your typical questions look like in the free response section. There is some kind of general statement followed by 3 to 4, sometimes more, sometimes less, subpoints that need to be addressed. You'll notice that it's already given to you an outline form, A, B, C, D. That is the format that you will want to follow as you continue to move forward. Okay, so this is the question that we're looking at, and we are going to walk through how to answer this together in a way that will help you answer efficiently and effectively, and consider the time. Okay, step 1 is to plan. Once again, you want to spend 5 minutes of each question planning, outlining, brainstorming, coming up with good examples and things like that. I'm going to walk you through a 6-step process to use in this 5-minute planning period to help you get all of your ideas together in an organized way so that when it comes time to write, you'll be prepared. first thing you want to do is look at what level of Bloom's taxonomy is the question asking. This goes back to the previous video when we talked about levels of thinking and cognitive processes and how Bloom's relates to that. Okay, you're going to want to make sure that you write the question or your response to it at the same level it's being asked in the question. Okay, so if it's asking you to answer on a knowledge or comprehension level, make sure that you write that. And if it's written at an analysis level, make sure that you're writing at that level and not writing at a level that is too low. All right, so what you should do at this point is go back and look at the levels of Bloom's taxonomy file or web link that I provided in the previous video, the Bloom's taxonomy video. Look at that and see if based on the question, you can come up with the answer to this question in terms of what is it asking, okay? And I will pause and we can go back and look at that together. Okay, if we look at the question, we see a couple of verbs in there. We see define. Define is in there twice. Define and give an example of geographic determinism. Define and give an example of geographic possibilism. And then we see the word distinguish. Distinguish between the effects of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global population, and to distinguish between the effects of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global agriculture. So we have two words there, define and distinguish. All right. And let's go back and look at our chart and figure out where those two things go. Okay, and so here we see again the question. We said that our define are going to be knowledge level and our distinguish are going to be analysis. So as we are writing our question, we want to make sure that we account for those parts. Okay, the next part of our plan is to determine what major human geography concepts are being addressed in the question. So what are the big ideas that the question wants us to know? All right, so let's go back and look at the question and determine those things, and then we'll come back and see if we got it right. Okay, if we take a look at the question, what are the major concepts? Well, we have possibilism and determinism, and what those things mean. We also have implications or directly stated that it's about population and agriculture as well. So those are the big concepts that you want to think about. So on this question, those are the things that you want to focus on that you really want to, as you continue planning, to try to narrow down and to be more detailed about. So if we come back to our plan, we have our 4 big concepts there that we will want to refer to and to use. All right. Okay, next question is, what are the specific concepts that are being addressed? So when we look at specifics, what types of things do we need to account for? And this is a good place to put examples. You'll want lots of examples in your writing. When you're answering an FRQ, you want lots of stuff in there that kind of makes your point for you. So one thing that you want to do is make sure that you add lots of examples. This is a good place to do that, okay? So let's pause, and then we'll go look at the question again and see what the big concepts are, or the more specific concepts are. Okay, so if we look at the more specific concepts, we've said that it's about population determinism and it's about possibilism, but it's also going to be about climate. Some climate things are implied here. There is a discussion of population distribution and population clustering, the reasons for those clusters. There's some implied or directly stated knowledge or asking for information about agriculture regions, climate regions, those kinds of things. So those are all things that should be in your more specific list. If we go back to our more specific list, here are the 3 things that we're looking for when we are planning this essay. So population distribution, agricultural regions, and climate. I'm going to go ahead and quickly do the next question, which is there a specific region or area in the world being addressed? And so you'll want to go back and look at that. To save us a little bit of time, I'm just going to put no, because there's not for this question. All right? So those are all things that you'll want to keep in mind. Okay, our next question in our planning process is going to be, is there a specific time frame given? So some questions are going to ask you for a particular time frame, particular set of years, or comparing some things together. In this particular case, I'll save you some time. You'll want to go back and look at that each time. But for this one, we're just going to say no, because there's not a specific time frame given. Which moves us on to question number 6, which is how many examples does the question ask for? And as a general rule, you should always have at least one example. So if the question doesn't specifically ask for one, then it is implied that there needs to be at least one. At the end of your essay or the end of your free response, you should go back and add more examples if you have time. But we'll get to that process here in just a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the question and determine how many examples each part is actually asking for. Okay, so here's our question. And if you look at part A, it says give an example, that's 1. Part B says give an example, that's 2. If you look at part C, it does not specifically mention an example, so we're going to imply that there's one there. And the same thing on part D. There is not one stated, so that is implied. So you're looking at one for each section or 4 in total. Okay, let's go back to our question. All right, here's our question, and here's our examples, remembering that while it says 0 for part C and D, that's because it is implied, okay? The implication is there. So really we're looking at 4 examples minimum for this particular FRQ. Okay, so that is the last step of our pre-planning process. That whole thing should take us 5 minutes. It's taken much longer on the video because I'm intentionally walking you through each step. And you should go through each step in your head, but be able to do it much quicker than I have done this. So 5 minutes should give you lots of time to plan and brainstorm and get your response together. All right, so let's move on to the next stage, which is actually creating an outline of your response. Let's start with making our outline. So when we make our outline, we're going to start with part A of the question. And part A of the question says, define and give an example of geographic determinism. Okay, I'm going to pause and let you take a few minutes to answer that question. Okay, let's look at my response. The thing to remember here is that there is more than one way to answer this question. So this is just a suggestion. So your answer may not be word for word the same, and that's okay. It needs to still have the same general concepts and spirit of mind. So here we have geographic determinism is the concept that human activity is controlled by the physical environment. Under determinism, humans can act or live only in ways that are supported by the environment. Okay, one example of this is climate. Long-term physical characteristics such as latitude, ocean currents, and the orographic effect are beyond human control and determine settlement patterns, agricultural patterns, and other patterns of human activity. Okay, so that's my response. Okay, remember, so here is the answer to this question, the define part. Here is the give one example part. Okay, so your response should have both of those. All right, let's see what this looks like on your paper. Okay, here is what it should look on your paper. At the top, you see our question, and then below that, we see part A, with part A having both the answer and the example included. And later on, we'll look in more detail about how this should look. Okay, let's go on and look at part B. Okay, part B of our outline. Part B of our outline asks us define and give an example of geographic possibilism. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that, or a few minutes to do that. I'll pause. Okay, let's look at the answers. So geographic possibilism is the concept that while the physical world places constraints on human activity, people have a great deal of control over how they use and manipulate the physical environment. Okay, that's our definition. One example of this is the use and development of technology. The creation and spread of air conditioning in the last half of the 20th century has helped lead to migration and economic development in regions like the American South. Okay, if we look at our answer in more detail, we can see here is our definition, and here in red is our example. So we have included both important and key parts. Okay, let's see what this looks like on your paper. Okay, here we are back on our paper. Here's our question at the top. Here's part A in paragraph form, and here is part B. So we have a nice outline being developed here that will also serve as our response. Okay, let's go look at part 3. Okay, if we look at part C of the question, Part C asks us to distinguish between the effect of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global population. So this is an analysis level question. This is not simply just know something, but be able to break it into parts and understand some causes and some effects. Okay, so our answer is determinism affects population distribution and that humans need to live close to a source of fresh water in order to drink, produce food, trade, and interact. Humans cannot live in large numbers without access to fresh water, so the need for water determines where people live. Possibilism affects population distribution by allowing humans to use and manipulate the environment to allow them to live in regions that would be difficult to inhabit otherwise. One example is desalination technology. Desalination removes impurities from the sea from seawater, making it safe to drink. This allows some settlement in areas that have limited amounts of fresh water. Okay, so that's our response. And the thing to remember here is that there was not a question, or excuse me, an example asked for in the question, so it implied one extra example. So when we look at here is determinism, and there we have the fresh water example, and then we have possibilism and the desalination example. Okay, let's look at this one on your paper. Okay, here is our example on part C. So there you can see the question and your part C paragraph there with your answer and your examples. Okay, so let's move on to part D. Part D of the question. Part D says distinguish. Once again, distinguish is an analysis level verb. Between the effects of determinism and possibilism on the distribution of global agriculture. Okay, so determinism affects the distribution of agriculture because soil type and quality are determined naturally. Many parts of the world do not have high quality soil. New Guinea, for example, has poor rocky soil that limits it to production of root crops such as taro. The quality of soil prevents these societies from growing high calorie crops such as wheat. Possibilism affects agriculture in that it advances the use of, in that advances in technology have allowed for soil to produce greater amounts and varieties of food. Use of fertilizers, pesticides, and genetically modified organisms allow places like India and China to feed far more people. Okay, so if we look at these parts, once again, we're asking to distinguish between two things. And once again, there is no example given in the question, so we're going to imply the need for one example. So here is determinism with our example. Here's possibilism with our example. And let's see what this looks like on paper. Okay, so this is what it looks like on paper. I'm going to scroll up a little bit to show you once again our question is there. We'll scroll down a little bit so you can see the answer, which is written here at the bottom. So by this point, we have 4 good, strong paragraphs written in outline form. So the next step that you need to do is to stop what you're doing, stop writing, and do a real quick review. And we'll move on to that step now. Okay, step 3 is to review and fill in. You should be up to a little over 20 minutes now in your writing of this particular FRQ. Obviously, our video is taking much longer than that, but that's okay. In real life, it'll go much faster. So when you review, you're always going to review, but only fill in as necessary. Okay, remember time is important. We cannot get too bogged down here. Okay, what should I review? What you review your plan, the things that you planned for in the beginning. Go back and review your plan. What does the sample response address the appropriate level of blooms? Have you written it at the appropriate level? Okay. Have you addressed the major APHG concepts, those big concepts? Are they in there? Have you addressed the specific concepts in detail? Did you address the specific region that might be asked for? Did you address the specific time frame? Remember, all of these things, if they're in the question, need to be addressed. And then address the appropriate number of examples. Okay, so when we go back and look at our example on our paper and what a review paper might look like, here's what it might look like. Okay, here if we look at our paper, what I've done is I've highlighted where we've answered the question and where we've given an example. So the red are our answers, the blue are our examples. Now I do not expect you to go back and color code and highlight your responses. Don't worry about that. But I do want you to notice that every part of the question that was asked for is in my response. And that's what I want you to do also, is make sure that your response lines up with what the question asked for and with the plan that you created. Okay, if you've answered yes to all these questions, you need to stop. Stop what you're doing. You've answered the question. You've done the best job you can. Move on. You have a limited amount of time. You do not want to get caught at the end with no time because you spent too much time reviewing and editing. Okay. One of the important things to mention here also is the AP graders are grading your writing as if it is rough draft quality. So some of the mechanics, grammar, spelling are not that big a deal. So if you're one of these people that likes to get really bogged down and meticulous about some of those details, don't let that happen here. When you're done, move on. You've answered the yes to all those questions. You're good. If you want to come back later, you can. Okay? You have more questions to write, so come back to those if you have time. What if you answered no to any of the questions when you reviewed? Also stop. Pizza doesn't lie. Stop. Why? Because once again, you've used your time for this question. Move on to the next one. Answer it as best you can. When you get to the end of that third question, if you have time, you can still come back and do some revisions and things like that. So once again, we're not looking for perfect grammar or mechanics or things like that. We're looking for the best possible essay that you can do. Okay? Final review. So once you've written all three responses, not just one question, but all three, what should you do? If you still have time left after you've written all three of your FRQs, some things you could do is you could go back and add some examples if you want to. This is where what I call the +1 rule comes in, where if you have a question that asks for one example, maybe give them a second one. But do that at the end if you have time. Okay, write a thesis statement if you think it'll be helpful to organize your thoughts in that way. But once again, do that at the end. Maybe draw some conclusions or some wrap ups to each of your essays to kind of once again restate what your essay is about. Only if you have time at the end. Do not spend time writing time doing that. You could review your writing for clarity. Are there things that are unclear, things that aren't neat, things that are maybe mechanically need to be fixed? All that's great at the end of the process, not at the end of each question. If you're really bored, dry hand turkey, that's always a possibility. So you could do that. So, I always look for hand turkeys when I'm grading. Um, anyway, so that is kind of the high points to remember as we move forward with our answering these free response questions for each content unit. We'll start this with the population unit and continue there. But we're going to use this same process as we go through. So make sure that if you need to watch this video again to remind yourself what to do, feel free to do that. Okay, that's all for now, and we'll see you next time.